Hello, everyone. This is Sarepti, aka Craig of the Acid Horizon podcast and the Left Hand podcast. And today I am introducing to you this. This is Vintagia. Vintagia was a shower thought gone wild. Many people already know that I created the Philosopher's Tarot, and then I was a co-creator of Acephalus, the erotic tarot of George Bataille. And now I have created Vintagia, the I Ching Oracle for psychogeography and creative discovery. And today what I would like to do is walk you through some of the functions of Vintagia, talk about its multiple uses, and I would also like to seduce you into supporting the Vintagia Kickstarter campaign that's currently ongoing, and join the community on Discord that I've created that I hope will encourage folks to contribute to Vintagia as a larger cultural project of sorts, which after the Kickstarter campaign, I hope to release into the public domain. Anyway, right now we're taking a look at the packaging and the booklet that comes with Vintagia and its aesthetics. And in addition to the classic I Ching divinatory functions, Vintagia is meant to be an enhancement for your creative projects and a guide for psychogeography, which we'll talk about in a different video. Today, we will focus on how to read the I Ching with Vintagia, and also if you are a musician, a poet, a fiction author, a therapist, an educator, how to use the various prompts to better elicit your creative ideas. This is what Vintagia is all about. It's an analog companion to get you to become more creative. And the vintage VCR aesthetics of Vintagia are not gratuitous by any means. In fact, the image of the VCR and analog recording plays an important part in many of the functions of the deck. But that said, the analog futurism or corduroy punk of the deck is pretty cool to me anyway. The images featured on the cards in Vintagia come from a project called Documerica from the 1970s. They are now in the public domain. And let's go ahead and take a look at the first function, the simplest function of Vintagia, which is the vector drift. There are escalating orders of complexity and use in Vintagia, and at the top of the card, you'll see the traditional Chinese hexagram with its relevant naming. And then at the bottom, you will see there is a little phrase or prompt. These phrases are like prods to the intuition, like Brian Eno's oblique strategies, but then you'll also see that there's a little icon on the card from the VCR panel. This one has record, and this card is the taming of the small. Now, if you use this card like oblique strategies, there is actually an extra step that you can take. So if you draw another card, you use the prompt on the first card, but then on the second card, you will look at the VCR icon. And in this case, we have record. Now, the prompt on our first card says restrain embellishments, lighten your touch. But the record icon on the second card will lead you to a secondary prompt. So let's take a look at another card here. We have hexagram 21 biting through, and you'll see then at the bottom of the card, it has its own vector drift, and it also has the fast forward icon. Now the vector drift in this case says begin and end with cutting. So when do you use a vector drift? Well, if you are going to write a piece of music, or you're writing a piece of poetry, or you're in the middle of writing the next great American novel. The vector drift gives you a little bit of a push, but then you're going to draw another card and look at the icon from the VCR panel at the bottom of the card, which could be play, pause, eject, rewind, fast forward, slow motion, or stop. Here we have eject on splitting apart, card 23. So depending on the VCR panel icon, you're going to get a different secondary phrase to tack on to the initial vector drift, and it's going to give you a complex boost of intuition. And soon, members of the Vintagia Discord will be able to access a PDF of the operating instructions. Now, we are looking at Vintagia's special configuration for a normal draw of the I Ching. Ordinarily, you would use yarrow stalks or coins, but here you're going to draw your first card at the top. This is going to give you the primary hexagram, which is 46 pushing upwards, and also notice the VCR panel icon, which is slow motion. Now, if you know the I Ching, ordinarily you would get the primary hexagram, the changing lines, and the hexagram into which it is changing, all from the same draw. But in Vintagia, a classic I Ching draw starts with the primary card, and then what we do is we draw 4 cards beneath it. And what I'm doing right now is checking to see whether or not the icon at the bottom of one of these 4 cards is the same as the primary card on top. So far, there are no dice. So you can see we have slow motion at the top, we have record, eject, fast forward. We have one more card. We'll take a look, and it is play. So what does this mean? It means that in traditional I Ching terms, we are firmly in this hexagram, 46, pushing upward. Now, what does it look like when a hexagram does in fact change? Well, I've already loaded the deck, as it were, and this is the configuration the cards will appear in when you have a hexagram that changes. So at the top, we have hexagram 28, and we're going to go through these cards one by one, and you're getting a little mini flip through here as I go through the cards. And so far there are no dice, but on the last card we do have a match. So you will see that we have the rewind icon, which matches our primary card, which means we will deal another card. In this case, we have hexagram number 52. So we have hexagram 28 changing into hexagram 52. And if you know your I Ching, now you can deduce what your changing lines are based on this change. And you have an interesting configuration of vintage photography to look at as you interpret the spread. But Vintagia takes you one more step. So what you will do is you will draw another card at this time, and you are going to check this icon as well. Here we have play, and when you refer to the operating instructions inside the box, it's going to give you a list of meditation modalities which correspond with the various functions on the VCR panel. And here I've drawn a second card just to show you yet another card and another icon, and look, you can choose the meditation modality without drawing, but that takes a little bit of the fun out of it. But there's different things like breath work, journaling, active imagination, and more. Now, when I created this deck, people said, you should make your own spread. But the question was, what kind of novel intervention or addition could I make to the I Ching? So what I decided to do was cross-pollinate some of my research interests. So I decided to create a spread called 4 Horizons, which is based on the metaphysics that Deleuze presents in his book on Nietzsche. But I wanted to do this in the context of a compass with north, south, east, and west directions, in which the North Pole would signify active or magnetic forces. The South Pole would be passive, or what I call abyssal forces. And then on the east side, we would have what are called accretions, things coming into perception. And then finally on the west, we would have erosions, things that are fading away or drifting away from perception. And so that will give you a basic sense of the 4 Horizons compass. And so at the top, the active forces or the differences that are coming back metaphysically, this time are in the form of hexagram 44 coming to meet. A sudden arrival or intervention that disrupts the calm. A challenge that is compounded by 4, youthful folly. A hexagram of uncertainty, but potential, but with a need for guidance. And in the southern position, it represents a kind of anxiety or worrying, which is troubling our capacity to deal with the challenge in the northern pole. So the active force is a powerful encounter that is pulling you forward. It feels sudden, it feels fated, but beneath it, there's an uncertainty that holds us back. And that gives us the sort of material dimension here. But there's something coming in and out of focus at this time. And on the eastern horizon, we have card 3, difficulty at the beginning. A chaotic birth that has not yet found its rhythm. But what's going out of focus right now is hexagram 22, grace. And here we might say that a certain veneer of aesthetic harmony is starting to dissipate or become diaphanous amidst the other forces identified in this configuration. Our method of interpreting the 4 horizons depends on a number of factors, but I want to show you that things could be different if things were inverted. The meaning of 44, for example, changes when it moves from north to south, where what would ordinarily be an enlivening encounter becomes a compulsive type of encounter. And then at the end, we're going to put another card in the middle. This is called the needle card. And here we're not going to check the hexagram, but we're going to check the VCR icon, which is going to send us back to the operating instructions, which has a robust list of multimodal meditations specifically tailored for the Four Horizons spread. And I'm just throwing another card down here. This time we have rewind, so we would check the rewind subsection of the VCR panel functions for the Four Horizons spread. Imagine if you were a writer, you could construct a character or a little plot based on the Four Horizons spread. But let's say you are the kind of person inclined to believe that this is all just hocus pocus divination. There's nothing for me in Vintagia. Well, you are absolutely wrong, and I'm going to tell you why. Is because if you are an artist, a musician, a therapist, or an educator, there are a whole series of prompts for different ways of creating that map on to the various traditional meanings of the I Ching's hexagrams. And for each one of those prompts, there is a specific list of VCR panel functions. So let's say you're a composer, for example. Not only are there 64 prompts for composing music that have intuition in mind, but the icons on the VCR panel will pair with those hexagrams to construct different interventions, different prompts, in novel combinations every time to give you something new to think about before you set out to create a piece of music, for example, or write a story or a poem, or do active imagination or a journal exercise. Now, let's take a look at this card here. This is number 32, Constancy. And let's talk about some of the prompts. Let's say you are a writer. You might get a prompt like this. Write a story or a poem where nothing significant happens, but the passage of time is hypnotic and immersive. Now, maybe that's all you need to get going, but let's try another card. Now, this time with the VCR panel icon. This time we have card 37, Family. And let's say you are a therapist doing active imagination by yourself or with someone else. The prompt in this case would be, you enter a house where generations of ancestors are gathered. What do they ask of you? What do they speak to you? But then you draw another card, and this time you have the record icon. So in conjunction with your active imagination session, you're going to go to the record icon prompt. Or maybe it's the pause icon. Now, the pause icon will indicate to hold an image in stillness if you're doing active imagination. But each one of the VCR panel icons has its own specific activity associated with it. Now here's one more. We have hexagram 15, Modesty. Let's say you're composing some music. The prompt for hexagram 15 is, write a minimalist piece that embraces restraint and simplicity, right? So this is one way to go, but you're also going to have the VCR icon to help you out here. So in conjunction with card 15, we're going to pull one more card. And this time we have the family again, but we're not looking at the hexagram. We are going to look at the fast forward icon as you see it here. Now for musicians, there are multiple prompts for fast forward when composing. For the icon on this card, record, there are many options listed in the instruction book. For example, pulling a sound from a place like Freesound or any other open source archive to enhance a recording or a composition that you're creating. And don't think I forgot about the fine artists as well, whether you do sculpture, collage, painting, anything like that. Here we have card 12, Standstill. Depict something on the verge of decay. An artwork that feels stuck, frozen, or caught in an inescapable cycle. The icon this time around is play, which could be realized by creating a gesture or a movement in conjunction with the piece of art that you're creating to create an enriched artistic process. Just another card here. Here's number 45, Gathering Together. If you were journaling, your prompt would be, what communities or social circles nourish you? How can you deepen your relationship with these kinds of communities? Here we have fast forward. And for the journaling prompts, fast forward instigates you to think from the perspective of your future self, whether a week from now, a month from now, or maybe even 10 years from now. Anyway, this was just a brief introduction to Vintagia. There's a lot going on in this book, and as the Vintagia community develops, we are going to ask its members to create their own prompts. And we hope to release everything into the public domain. So if you like what you saw here today, if you got an intimation of the possibilities of Vintagia, Go ahead and back the campaign in the show notes now.